Today we'll be talking about the security operations collection of modules for ServiceNow. We'll start with just an overview, sort of why security operations exists, what value it serves to the enterprise, and we'll move on, look at the three core modules individually, and then we'll have some demo and Q&A time. So at a lot of organizations, you start out with a collection of tools. In most cases, they might be connected, but in most cases, they end up being disconnected. You'll have your threat intelligence platform, such as Threat Connect or Recorded Future, your endpoint system, your SIM, and your vulnerability management platform like Qualys. I put phishing response on there. A lot of times that just ends up being a matter of procedure. You know, what procedure there is to handling phishing messages. Sometimes there will be a solution, but a lot of times it'll just be a matter of procedure. The value of ServiceNow security operations is it not only allows the data between all of those sources that the enterprise already has. It allows that data to be integrated. And it also allows you to leverage the data and processes already existing in your ServiceNow instance, like your ITIL, so for your incident change problem management. Security operations has the ability to leverage those for the purpose of remediating vulnerabilities or handling security incidents. And they also rely very heavily on existing CMDB data because every incident at its core has a CI that's related to it. So it is allowed to ingest that data from the CMDB and take it into account when scoring or when just in the process of remediating an incident. You need to know where the incident occurred or where the vulnerability lies. And on top of that, the three modules have integrations with one another. So security incident can take threat data into account when enriching the data on the security incident, or if a vulnerability is found that requires more of a in-depth investigation and remediation, and it rises to the level of an incident, it has an integration with the security incident response module. So as that diagram showed, there's those three main modules to the security operations suite. The first one that we'll go over is security incident response, and it's used for tracking the progress of security incidents. And it's standards compliant, so it adopts NIST and SANS standards for incident handling in terms of stages of an incident, and it has the ability to work with either of those. It also has the ability to use your SIM as a source for security incident data. A lot of times SIMs have the ability to manage incidents within the SIM itself. The difference there is you don't have those integrations with your ITIL stack. Sometimes you may not have integrations with your endpoint, or for the other integration, the handling of phishing emails. Whereas those are all integrations provided in ServiceNow, so all of your data can flow into one point and you can manage the process. Since ServiceNow is ServiceNow and it's highly customizable, you have the ability to adapt what ServiceNow provides to an organization's procedural needs. There are predefined workflows that security operations provides for handling certain types of incidents. So if a phishing message comes in, that might be there will be a workflow out of the box to handle phishing workflows if a process doesn't already exist. A lot of what I have seen is the implementation I was involved in. We took a lot of what ServiceNow had and modified it slightly, but there's a big effort given to keeping the process as out of the box as possible for the sake of support. The security operations also has the ability to automatically score security incidents based on severity criticality, which again, with that CMDB integration, can pull the business criticality from the CI and score the security incident based on what CI is affected. And this is something that I did not note as a bullet point. Each of the security operations modules are scoped. So within the security operations, they have a scoped security incident response knowledge base for holding security incident data. So your security incident, when it's complete, can become an entry in your security incident knowledge base. Also, for the processes that exist within an organization that might not rise to the level of having a whole workflow designed, or might not be able to have a workflow design because it would require a lot of integrations that might not be possible. There's the ability to create manual runbooks. And those security runbooks are also stored in the knowledge base and can be linked to a security incident based on the category of that security incident. So a rogue service might have, there might be a special runbook for handling that is very manual in nature, but it also has a set procedure. That would be a great application for a runbook. Security Incident also provides service catalog items for reporting phishing, for reporting various other security incidents via the service catalog or portal. The degree to which you'd want to use those might vary because you want your security incidents coming from trusted sources. And there's probably in an enterprise, there's probably there's fewer instances when you would want someone manually entering a security incident. So I have not implemented that, but that is a feature the security incident provides. And again, can never reiterate it too much. The maturity of the CMDB cannot hurt your security incident data. The more mature your CMDB is, the more data the security incident response application has to work with. The second module within security operations is vulnerability response. Its purpose is to organize, track, and manage the resolution of vulnerabilities. Similarly to security incident, it also provides severity and risk score calculators so that you can, based on the vulnerability that is present on a CI, you can score that differently. You can also, because it has a CMDB integration, there's almost limitless possibilities for how complex you could make your scoring algorithm. Obviously, the more complex, the more difficult to maintain, but there's a lot of data there. Also the integrations, out of the box, you'd have integrations with the National Vulnerability Database for common vulnerabilities and exposures, and also with MITRE for CWEs, the common weakness enumerations. So any one of those items that gets fed into ServiceNow via that integration can be linked to a vulnerability. We also, vulnerability response also has the ability to integrate with your vulnerability response system like Qualys and pull that data in. And there are also integrations for not only inbound data integrations, but also outbound integrations to schedule a security scan or and when it manages that, when it performs that security scan, it can actually update the data in vulnerability based on the outcome of that scan. Again, predefined workflows are provided through vulnerability response for handling the scanning and a few other operations. And again, I said it for security incident, but for vulnerability, CMDB is a million times more necessary because of the nature of how CIs are used. In security incident, arguably CIs, they're without a doubt useful, but they're one other piece of information along with every other piece of information that security incident will provide. In vulnerability, if you don't know where a vulnerability is and you don't have details about where that vulnerability is, the vulnerability data can be next to useless. The third spoke in the security operations is threat intelligence. This module organizes and correlates threat data from threat sources. Observable data can be harvested from security incidents and then cross-referenced with known indicators of compromise that flow through from integrations. There are some modules out there like Recorded Future that actually have their own sort of threat intelligence. When you install the module, it has its own set of tables, but using the out-of-the-box threat intelligence that ServiceNow provides, you have the ability to do Stix taxi integrations, which are basically XML web services that allow you to pull data in. The threat platform I've worked with is Threat Connect, and it has the ability, it publishes a Stix taxi feed that you can actually connect to ServiceNow and feed your threat data in. And when that threat data gets fed in, again, as I mentioned, threat intelligence integrates with security incident. So you have that ability to know what indicators of compromise are present, if any indicators of compromise are present in a given security incident. Let's tackle that MSSP question. I have not integrated it with an out-of-the-box solution. The integration I did was very much custom. The MSSP I worked with had a ServiceNow instance on their end, and we used a collection of web services, custom-built web services to send security incident data from our instance to their instance upon update. And then on their side, there was web services calls were made to the ServiceNow instance I maintained to update our incidents. And there were also field translation that needed to happen because I believe that MSSP was actually working out of the incident table and not the security incident table. So you had some field incompatibility there, but it's a technical possibility without question. If there is an integration for an MSSP, I have not implemented that, and I'm not aware of any. I'll just jump right into the demo. We'll start with security incident. Security incident is, without question, the most procedure heavy of all of the three modules, and that'll become especially clear when we start looking at workflows. But even just adopting the NIST compliance, you have the ability to view your the states of your security incident. The states correspond to the NIST incident states. And again, very similar to a traditional incident, you can enter configuration item. The source field, I find that field to be very useful because it'll tell you what source your incident was created from. So if you have a SIM integration and an incident gets automatically created, it'll come up as the source is SIM. As I said, there's a vulnerability response integration. So if incident was created from vulnerability, you would have that as a source. As a side note about the MSSP, when we did the MSSP integration, we created a custom source for MSSP so that if our MSSP actually discovered an incident, they would be able to enter an incident and it would get sent over to us and populated, and we would know that it came from them because of the source. Someone's asking for vulnerabilities, is it pulling direct from NIST or is it coming from someone else like Nessus or Rapid7? Yes, on both points. Out of the box configuration pulls from NIST, and then you can have a secondary vulnerability system set up as your vulnerability management system and have that integrated with ServiceNow, such as Rapid7 or Qualys. So let's go down. One of the things that can become very intimidating with security incident is the amount of related lists, probably rivaling that of the project form. There's a number of related lists, but there's also UI actions to mitigate those and allow me to only see the lists that are of interest to me at any given point. For example, CIs, affected users. If you have any child security incidents, vulnerable items or vulnerability groups, you'll see those relationships to the security incident. IOCs, this is where your threat intelligence data is cross-referenced with the security incident. So any observable that shows up in your security incident will be listed in the observables. Observable doesn't necessarily mean it's an indicator of compromise. All that an observable means it is observed in the incident. So all of those IP addresses listed were found somewhere in whatever element it was that generated this SIR. I believe in this case, it was an email. So all those IP addresses appeared somewhere in that email. Because there are no indicators listed, we know that there are no indicators of compromise known to ServiceNow that are related to those observables. And more enrichment data, this is where integrating with your endpoint system or certain custom integrations with your SIM, you'd be able to pull data based on CI, based on source IP address, based on destination IP address, and have the results of those enrichments show up here. And then tasks and response tasks. This is something that was very confusing for me right at first when you look at the tasks tab. Similar to incident task, where you can create an incident task as a child to an incident and assign it to somebody, you can create a response task as a child to a security incident, and then assign that response task potentially to a group that might not have access to security incident, but who would be involved in resolving that incident, like a server team of some sort. Might not be on the security team, but they would very much be involved in the mitigation of that incident or the resolution of that incident. the response tasks tab is where those response tasks are listed. And the reason there are two different tabs, if you create a change off of this security incident, which you have the ability to do via the hamburger menu, so hence the ITIL integration, any tasks made off of the security incident would be listed here, including changes. So for the sake of jumping around too much, we'll go ahead and look at workflows. So as I said, there are a lot of out-of-the-box workflows created based on category, the category of the security incident. So yeah, denial of service, malicious software, phishing, rogue server service, unauthorized access. And for organizations that don't have procedure in place, this is great because it can give them a starting point. For organizations that do have procedure in place, these workflows can be copied and saved so that they can modify the out-of-the-box resources without obviously copying it so they don't modify the original out-of-the-box, but they can adapt it to their needs, their business needs. Something that I also mentioned was the calculators for security incidents. So you have the ability to do calculations to populate risk score or to populate priority, severity. And it's a very robust framework in that you can have multiple, within one calculator group, you can have multiple calculators. So all of these calculators are related to severity. And each one of these calculators, if we just drill into one of these, we'll just take one of these anyway. So the condition can be a filter, group, but when the condition is met, a certain set of values are applied to a security incident. So the outcome of this script, if it evaluates true, then it evaluates the business criticality and sets impact risk, priority, and severity based on that business criticality. I showed the ITIL integration from the security incident side. Something else that is of value, if a traditional incident comes in via the help desk, that incident is worked by the help desk, it's worked by a certain team, and it's determined to be a security issue. A UI action is provided by security operations to actually create a security incident off of a traditional incident. And then we have the ability to work that, the SOC will have the ability to work this as a security incident, and it references the original incident. There's a lot of things that I have thought about in terms of the implementation of that. At what point do you want to close the original incident? I believe what in the past what I had done when that happens, the incident will remain open, and when the security incident is closed, the security incident will make a note on the parent incident so that the non-SOC team is aware that the security incident was handled and they can move forward with the resolution of the incident or whatever needs to be done. Moving on to threat intelligence. Again, I spoke about indicators, observables. So we'll just look at one of these indicators. So this is an indicator that was provided through Alien Vault, and it's a domain, and it gives us a confidence. So in the event that that observable showed up on a security incident, we would be able to drill into it, and we would say, oh, there is this information with more, this URL with more information on that observable. So then we could use that information in the resolution of the incident potentially. And observables, as I said, anything that's found on a security incident will get populated as an observable. And the taxi integration uses, again, I said it's an XML web service. It uses REST messages and REST methods to pull the threat data from, in this case, Alien Vault. But as I said, it could be from a proprietary threat feed that is compatible with Stix Taxi. And then in vulnerability, and what vulnerability starts out with are vulnerability groups. And these are, you will have a vulnerability group to group related vulnerabilities and vulnerable items. And that'll make sense in a little bit. But your vulnerability groups will be created in such a manner that the vulnerability group can be assigned to a group that would be responsible for mitigating or for resolving that vulnerability. And again, the vulnerability can have a risk score on it. But let's go down to vulnerable items. These are, a vulnerable item is literally where it all comes together. You have a CI that has a vulnerability, and you have a vulnerability itself. And in this case, the vulnerability is a CVE. And that the information from that CVE is present on the vulnerable item. So you know the CI that's affected, and you know what the vulnerability is. And again, the vulnerable item will also be assigned to a group for remediation. There are also assignment rules so that if a vulnerability group, so if a vulnerability meets this criteria, so if the vulnerability contains any words, or if a field or a field on a referenced record meets a certain criteria, it can be assigned to a certain group for remediation. And in my mind, that is the type of thing that would normally be done through like a business rule, but it provides the assignment rules. And again, similar to security incident, they have calculators so that you can calculate your risk, the weighting on the different fields, so how those fields will take into account the overall scoring of a vulnerability. Then for the actual vulnerabilities, these are from the various integrations. So the CVE integrations, the CWE integrations, and it has the scoring of the vulnerability, which can be taken into account in the calculating process. Very similar, the CWEs. And then if you have a third-party integration, so they appear to be using Tenable, I think, or have data for Tenable here. So this would be data that would be fed in from that third party of vulnerability, whether Rapid7, Qualys, or Tenable. And then in the same way that that CVE was attached to that vulnerable item, this vulnerability from the third party system could also be attached to a vulnerable, could be referenced in a vulnerable item. And I will say, just something I've noticed is the security incident and vulnerability tend to get a lot more attention, but there is a lot to be said for what can be done within the threat intelligence module. Reporting, yes. So since reporting is a platform feature, you can, there is PA for security incident. I believe it's for security operations. I think it's PA for security operations. So you would be able to do PA type reporting on your incident and vulnerability data. At the very least, though, you have the platform reporting functionality, so you can create reports on that scope data. Obviously, you want to make sure whoever has access to that report has access to the scope data behind it. Thanks again for coming, and y'all have a good day.